All right, welcome back to the Here to Their Wellness podcast. We are at week 3. Can you believe it, Megan? Woo woo!
Oh, I cannot.
Third episode in, going strong. This week we want to talk all about positive affirmations. So I'm really excited that Megan's going to tell us more about this because this is something that I struggle with a ton of, like how to sit down and do positive affirmations without like kind of feeling silly, like feeling like I'm like talking to myself, saying silly things, because we see it all the time, and I know it's really effective. So that's what we're gonna get into this week. So let's just jump right into it. So Megan, can you just start out by telling us what are positive affirmations?
So positive, it just kind of like how you described, it's really saying nice things to yourself. It sounds so dorky. But when that's kind of on the cuff, but when we drill into positive affirmations and positive self-talk, it's a little bit more intense than that.
Mm,
We are all born with a set of negative core beliefs. We are hardwired to have these, and I believe that they are present in our human experience because that is our opportunity to learn how to have relationships with ourselves. Now, it's negative self-talk, negative core beliefs. They're really insidious and they're really sneaky.
mm,
And we are so used to hearing them come out of our mouths or about ourselves, or our listening to our own thoughts, that we don't even recognize them when we say them. Oftentimes they're really, really, really subtle, really subtle. So such as I just had this conversation with someone earlier today. What was it? I am here to help other people, but I can't help myself. I said,
mm.
well, that's, and that has become the narrative that person has said over and over and over again, without meaning it to be negative self-talk. But that's what I mean when I say insidious. There's negative core beliefs. Negative self-talk is sneaky, and it infiltrates our thoughts and our behaviors and our actions all the time without us even realizing it, because when we're in it, we can't see it. It's, seeing the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so as the person who's on the listening side, it's much easier for me to see it and to hear it. I've had this argument with people for years about negative self-talk, and I'll have people say things like, "I didn't mean it that way," and my response is always, "Yes, but you said it. You said
Yeah.
it that way." Our emotional brains are not designed to interpret sarcasm at all. So when we say, "Oh, I'm just a big dummy," and because we're frustrated, our emotional brain doesn't go, "Oh, she's just kidding." Our emotional brain says, "Wow, I'm a big dummy." Our emotional brains are extraordinarily literal because they are like little kids. Little kids. Have you ever tried to teach sarcasm to a little kid, or like ever try to be sarcastic with a
Yeah.
little kid?
Does not go over well. But somebody's
No,
crying by
it's
the end of it. It's either me or the kid.
totally. And so self-talk is that. It's talking to, it's, again, it sounds cheesy, but it's talking to the little us's inside of all of us. And that's why positive talk, positive affirmations are so important and so vital, because I truly believe that everything in regards to success and goal attainment and achieving happiness and holistic and sustainable health and wellness begins and ends with self-talk and positive affirmations. People do not become successful if they tell themselves they will never be successful.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. I mean, I never thought of it that way, like what you highlighted of saying that our brains literally, like that emotional part of our brains literally can't interpret sarcasm, which so
Right.
many people take into their everyday language, like we are trained to be able to read even from somebody's body language, if they're being sarcastic or if they're being sincere, whatever it may be. Um, Whereas when we're saying it to ourselves, it's just taken in the most literal form.
And I mean, as somebody who teaches this and works with clients on this on a daily basis, I catch myself all the time. Everybody who knows me, who my children, that's terrible self-talk. I mean, it's just because it's so pervasive, and we have this idea that self-deprecation is funny.
Mm.
Ha, really, it's not. And it's really a coping strategy to hide the pain that's going on with the inner child.
And that's something, I mean, it's like, first of all, you're raising little mini self-advocates. They're like, be better to yourself. But um but I love that. But that's, I mean, it's kind of like what you're saying, like as insidious as the negative self-talk is, the positive self-talk is like, tenfold as rewarding in terms of like planting those seeds of growth and those seeds of like finding your own light, of like being able to give yourself that foundation, starting with, internally with your brain.
Right. And I mean, so it's the kind of thing, you don't, I don't believe it's possible to master self talk. I don't really believe it's possible to master a lot of these that I would call tools for sustainable and holistic health and wellness. They are things that need to become habitual. They are
Mm,
disciplines. They are a way of living life. Because even the person with the best self-talk in the whole wide world, I am guaranteeing you, has moments where they go, wow, I fucking suck.
mhm.
It's just human nature. It's just how we're wired. Um,
And it's one of those things, again, like we touched on this briefly last week, but social media, right? Like you're seeing
oh,
1%. It's like the iceberg, right? You're seeing 1% of somebody's life, and they seem like the kind of person who has it all figured out and is optimistic and a positive person and has the best life. And then, like you said, at some point, everybody has low points, which is totally normal. I think
yeah,
like struggling with self-talk is totally normal too.
my God, totally normal. And if it wasn't, then it wouldn't be a topic.
Hmm. It reminds me of,
It
it's
wouldn't be
almost like,
something.
sorry, go ahead.
I would just say it wouldn't be something that I literally say or talk about pretty much with every single client I have every single day.
That's so interesting. So, like clients coming in, though, would you say like the root of a lot of the problems come back to that self-talk and that the way that
Oh
they're,
yeah,
that's crazy. Because I'm sure, like you said,
absolutely.
you don't see it. It's the seeing the forest, the trees through the forest. You don't see it till somebody holds a mirror up to your face, or like it's
Right.
it's like being in a bad relationship, right? When you're in it, you don't see
Mhm.
it, and then once you're out of it, you look back and you're like, how did I do that to myself, or how did I, let
Right.
myself go through that?
Right.
It
And
almost
you
reminds me
use
of
self
like
talk
a,
to get out of that.
yeah. It reminds me of like an exercise, like physical exercise, like you're talking about being habitual. Like, you're not gonna, you get up and you run one day and you feel great. And then it's one of those things that has to become like a constant practice that you're like putting effort into.
We as humans do not really like change, and we're pretty lazy, and we want things, especially, I think, well, I shouldn't say especially, but I can pretty safely say, at least in the United States, we want things, we want immediate gratification, we want it easy, and sustainable and holistic health and wellness are not those things. They are not
Hmm.
easy. It's not a quick fix. It's a lot of work, and they are daily practices.
Hmm.
Um, use exercise as examples a lot because you go to the gym for a month and you feel good, and maybe you've lost some weight if that was your goal, and or even more so, you get to that goal weight or that goal pant size or whatever, if there's some sort of hard target like that, does that mean you get to stop? Does that mean that, oh, I'm here, I'm done, hooray? Like, no, 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 no. Then it
Hmm.
becomes maintenance. And that's going to wax and wane. I mean, there are going to be days where we're great at it, and there's going to be days where we suck at it.
Yeah.
Just because we suck at it one day doesn't mean we need to give up the whole practice, but that's what happens. That's why creating new habits and behaviors is so challenging, is because when people don't see the benefits immediately, they think it doesn't work. They give
A-
up.
And that's hard too, like you're saying, wanting that instant gratification or instant whatever it is, serotonin, whatever it is that's making you feel better. You may get it the first time you do it, and then like a positive affirmation, or like a meditation in that kind of sense, but like, and then keeping at it, like you said, the maintenance of it is just as important. Do you
I
think
would
do you,
almost say it's more important, to be honest. But then as I was thinking that, I realized we've got to get over that initial hump anyway. So they're equally important. But
yeah.
without the maintenance, nothing. Think about it. If we look at a vehicle, for example, if you don't do regular maintenance, your car's going to stop running.
Hmm.
If we don't do regular maintenance on our bodies, they're going to fall apart.
So do you think there are like, I don't want to say vices, but do you think there are other ways that people try to get the feeling that they get from positive self-talk or like positive affirmations? that's like more
Yeah, it's just
temporary.
drugs, alcohol, adrenaline rushes, sex, falling in love, chasing somebody, um, yeah, working out for some people, certain foods. Oh yeah, every like you said, vice, really, anything that attacks, or I shouldn't say attack, that's not fair. Anything that hits the pleasure center
Hmm.
is capable of doing that. So that's one of the reasons why sugar, for example, is so dangerous, because when they've done brain scans on people, they, if you, oh, I forget, how did it go? It was like, if with somebody who does a line of cocaine, it lights up the pleasure center, but if you eat sugar, it lights up the entire brain. So
That's
we
crazy.
as human, yeah, it's nuts. And we as people want to feel good. Our bodies and our brains are constantly working to feel good, to
Hmm.
feel in balance, and to feel whole and complete. And again, we are lazy as humans. And so we're going to look for the fastest fix we can find.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times that's the drug or the alcohol or the sex or mindlessly watching TV to tune out the thoughts in your head, or whatever it is. Um, but holistic health and wellness it's not easy, and it's not always fun. And this is where the long-term goal has to be more important than the short-term gratification. Otherwise, people won't be able to get there.
Yeah.
That's okay. If that's their journey, that's okay too.
Hmm. Because with all those things too, at the end of the day, all you have is yourself. Like with like, you'll have these momentarily these highs for a moment, or you'll have these different areas that come into like stimulate, like you're talking about the actual pieces of your brain and fire on the different centers in your brain. But like at the end of it, it's just you. So it's like the place to start.
Well, because we're guaranteed a few things in life. We're guaranteed that we're going to be born. We're guaranteed that we're going to die. We're guaranteed that things are going to change. And we're guaranteed that the only relationship we will have, start to finish, is with ourselves.
Yeah.
That everything else
Oh,
is a crapshoot.
put that on a t-shirt for me. I want that on like a t-shirt and a bumper sticker. Here to their wellness. We'll tell you what is guaranteed.
That's it.
Oh man, I love that.
People say, oh, well, you have to pay taxes. No, you don't.
Yeah, you could live
Your
off the
skin
grid in
color has to stay
Yosemite.
the same. Yeah, no, it doesn't. I mean, there are no hard fast rules except the four I've listed.
Hmm. So to get back into like the self talk and the positive affirmations. So where do you begin? Right, somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, you know what? Like today's the day they make the decision. Is it shaping those affirmations for yourself, for your personal life? Is it, seeing what works for people that inspire you? What do you think is the good way to start?
Oh gosh, you know, there really isn't one formula that works for everybody. But what
Mm,
I have come to find to be the most effective is kind of reverse engineering it. So when I have people work on self talk, it usually starts with, is the negative self talk and what does that do to you?
mhm.
It actually, we don't even start there. What is the negative self talk and what would that do to somebody else that you would say it to?
Yeah.
Kind of effect would it have? And then we kind of go backwards from there into, how does it make yourself feel? Like, and do you say this to, the 5-year-old you, or any 5-year-old, and but people, I think that the way to begin is to really understand how damaging negative self talk can be. And I think the best way to understand that is to think about what it would feel like to say those things to somebody else, whether it's a little kid, an adult, it doesn't matter, or what it's like to hear somebody say those things to someone you love. I
Mhm.
can guarantee that most people would never in a gazillion years tolerate hearing somebody else say to them or someone they love the nasty things that they say to themselves.
Yeah. Which is I mean, you see these people who come off as, right, you talk about like personas or archetypes, like people who come off as like they don't take shit from anybody and they live their own life and they do their own thing. And it's like you said, I'm sure that at some point they hit those low points as well. It's so no one knows what goes on behind closed doors, right? Like so interesting how people talk to themselves, that's something that we'll never see outwardly, unless you get to talking about it with somebody.
Was reading something the other day about how there really is no self, because self is really a perception, and nobody sees me the way I see me, and nobody sees you the way you see you. And it's all sort of tainted and different. So we are, is no one version that's
Hmm.
real. Anybody. So,
Even from the way somebody looks, right? You think about
right,
somebody's gonna see you from a different angle, even just the most like physical perspective.
right, right.
I wonder if that goes back to
Perception.
like how people, I feel like I always hear people say like I hate hearing my voice on recordings, or I hate seeing myself on video and things like that. Like you do a ton of videos. Did you initially were you like, "Oh, I don't like this," or were you just ready to dive right in?
It was weird at first and it got easier. I tend to not watch videos right away, tend to need a little bit of time from making them. And I think part of that is because some of them are pretty emotional, especially the cancer ones. I definitely needed a little bit of distance for those.
Of course, yeah.
Um, and I remember when COVID first began and we started telehealth, that was really, really strange. And I got to the point where I was on camera so much that it didn't even, just so normal now.
Hmm.
It doesn't really phase me. I don't really enjoy watching myself, but I see there's value in it, and not because I'm listening to how I sound necessarily. I'm listening to how I think I sound to other people so that I can figure out, oh, okay, I said like too many times, or there were too many
Hmm.
weird pauses, or I didn't like this gesticulation that I did, or I didn't like my eye contact here. So it's more of, and that sounds really critical, but it's more about how can I make a more effective presentation to my audience.
Hmm.
So
And again,
that
especially
took a
after
while to
this
get used
past
to.
year, when that's like, sometimes you'll have like a hybrid. I'm sure a client that does like a hybrid where it's like sometimes in person, sometimes virtual, um, or some kind of arrangement like that. But when you go all of a sudden very quickly to everything being virtual, that must
That
have
was
been crazy.
crazy. It was
Um,
so nuts.
yeah, but we digress to our videos. But I think that so one thing too. I mean, to kind of go back to think about how to shape it for yourself is like talking about reverse engineering, talking about like what when I always think about it, because I was just thinking about the module we do, the self-talk module, which is part of our Root to Fruit program. We can link that in our bio, and you can find it on our website. But it talks about things like what you say to yourself, like identifying the self-talk and where you think the root of that came from, right? Like it talks about, is it from a person, or has somebody said this to you before and it stuck with you? And it really is, I think, the most powerful display of how our words can impact like not just what we're saying to others, but like what we say to ourselves, like how those words really like have an origin of coming from somewhere.
If you talk to domestic violence survivors, they will tell you typically that they would rather get the sheet beat out of them every day than endure the emotional and verbal abuse that happens.
Wow.
How powerful that
That's
is, because bruises fade, broken bones mend.
mhm. That's like really powerful, I think, because again, it's the person, the abuser and the abusee, right? Like the person who is inflicting this kind of pain on somebody and so many times justifies it by saying, oh, like I never touched them, or oh,
Right.
whatever kind of mental torment they put them through. And then it's also kind of like a form of gaslighting, right? When the other person thinks, well, maybe it's not that bad, maybe I'm being dramatic, maybe I'm making it worse than it is. Yeah. That's like a whole abuse is a whole nother podcast episode. We could dive
But
down that for a
self
while.
talk is definitely involved in that too,
Yeah.
because we start, if if somebody's in that type of a situation, they lose, the victim starts being unable to hear their own voice, and all they're hearing is the voice of the abuser,
Hmm.
and the cognitive distortions that they're laying on really thick in order to keep the abuse occurring.
Yeah.
Most of that stuff, most of that stuff I believe is happening kind of below the surface. I don't think it's quite conscious. I don't think they're saying, how can I fuck up this person's life necessarily? But through their own past traumas and the way they were raised and how they viewed life and all that kind of stuff, we behave in ways that are familiar to us based on what we've seen.
Hmm.
So, it's just so much of life and so much of relationships with self and with others is all about these cycles that we have. And the fastest way to start breaking cycles and changing cycles is to start noticing how you talk to yourself.
Hmm. And it's interesting too, just to go back to something you said at the beginning of this episode when you're talking about somebody you're speaking with, and they said, I forget exactly the quote, but I can help others, but I can't help myself. Like that whole idea, because how many times do we hear, it goes again back to it. You wouldn't say it to your best friend. How many times do we hear people in our lives say something, and you're like, that's not true, or like, don't say that about yourself. Or I always say, I'm
Right.
like, don't say that about my best friend, like to my best friends.
Right.
I'm like, don't say that about her. But then I'm like, I'll go back and I'll be like, I have the same kind of thoughts or the same kind of things that go through my head. It's just that, like, actually breaking yourself out of it, whether you're saying it or not. Sometimes it's the people who aren't saying it outwardly who, are the ones who are hearing it the most internally.
Right. We never really know what's going on in somebody's internal landscape. Even as a clinician, I know what people tell me and what I can see. Um, I don't. Somebody can come in and say they're happy as a clam, and they can leave the office and do horrible things to themselves and to other people, and I would have no idea.
Hmm.
So
So
it's
do you
it's
see when you're doing, like, going through the self-talk with different clients, and you're working with people through that, is it, I know, like we're talking about, it's the maintenance, it's a long-term thing, but do you see like a change in their I guess, in how they're coming in, and how they're like bringing everything in? Does it change, or does it take like a lot of time to kind of get there?
so for most people, yes, I can see change pretty quickly. However, a couple things seem to happen. People and people stop doing things that are good for them because they're working. And if we don't identify the fact that there's this part of them that doesn't believe they deserve to feel better and they deserve to say kind things to themselves, the self talk won't stick. It just can't. So there's so much reprogramming that needs to occur, and somebody has to be really open to the experience. So a lot of times what'll happen is people will start identifying the self-talk. They'll go, wow, I say really shitty things to myself all the time, this is horrific. And they get scared, so they stop. Or they start making changes, they start to feel better, and they say, oh, I don't need to do this anymore because I feel better. It's like the whole back to the idea of the gym.
Hmm.
And if you that's why maintenance is so critical too, because you don't do the maintenance, it's not going to be sustainable. It just isn't.
That's such
So
an interesting way of looking at it, because it's your biggest and most valuable possession is like yourself. It's the thing you should be investing the most into.
it's the only thing it's
It's the
the
only
thing you
thing.
get to keep the
Yeah,
whole time. The whole time you're
you
here.
can't
That's
take
it.
it with you. Yeah, that's
Oh, not, I mean, we can lose body parts, we lose family, we lose friends, we lose pets, we lose children, we lose bicycles, we lose shoes, and we lose gloves. But what happens in your head stays with you the whole time.
Mhm. And that's one of the core foundations. And that's, we really, I mean, I know I'd mentioned it earlier. I think that's a really good place to start with when you talk about like our root to fruit program, because the whole program's really about how to like lay those roots for yourself, for kind of in some way the people around you, to be able to build up the self that you want to be, really. So this is like this is, you'll see on our website, this self-talk one is one of our first modules, which I think it's, having this every day where, you have somebody who is emailing you and coming in and walking you through things and giving you little exercises that you can go through. I think it's so valuable and so good for keeping you on track. What do they say? It takes 7 days to form a habit. What's that saying? It's like something.
No, that's not right. It it takes. So in the olden days, the first researcher whose name I can't remember found that it took at least 30 days
Yeah.
to start or break a habit, at least. But we're lazy, and so the people who were quoting it dropped the at least, and it started being it takes 30 days. So new
Oh, that's what it is.
research shows that it takes an average of 66 days. But when I've got people working on goal setting or new behaviors, I want to see the behavior for 90 days. If
Mm-hmm.
after 90 days there is not positive benefit from the behavior change, then we can look at it and decide if that made sense. Now, if there's something that is so intolerable that they can't get to 90 days, and that's obviously something that needs to be looked at too. But I don't consider it a true sustainable behavior until we've got it at least 90 days. And honestly, I'd rather see it for a year before I really feel like somebody's got a really good grasp of it.
Right.
Behavior change is hard. It's very hard.
And it's like, again, it's like anything, there's some days when it's easier, some days when it's harder, right? Like sometimes when you're going through it and you're like, I got this, I'm king of the world. And then the next day you wake up and you're like, I don't want to do this today. But it's all about shaping it for yourself. Yeah, I think the whole self-talk thing, there's so much out there too. I think there's a lot of really good literature. Obviously there's a lot to scan with with a weary eye, but in terms of actual affirmations, and like things to say to yourself, and like just to go back to what you're saying, to be able to like reverse engineer of like, what do you really like, what does your soul need? I feel like that's what I keep going back to for myself.
That's, I think, a great way of looking at it.
Yeah. So this is our podcast. We would definitely, we'd love to hear feedback. We've been doing this for 3 weeks now, and we have had a ton of fun. We come on and we laugh. I haven't cried yet, but I might later. Who knows what's going to happen? I don't know. Megan's a powerful woman. She can make me cry. So if you want to hear me cry, keep coming back. No, I'm just kidding. But we're going to keep, so we release these podcasts weekly. Obviously if you're listening to it right now, you found us on your streaming apps, but we definitely want to hear feedback. I mean, if you have some things you want to hear us talk more about, or some questions about things that we've mentioned on here, definitely feel free to reach out, either through our website, or you can find some of our contact info online. And we definitely would love for you to keep coming back. We so appreciate our listeners. Megan, how much do we love our listeners?
So much.
Love you so much.
We do.
But we really hope that this podcast and the things we talked about on here were helpful. And again, any questions you have, please don't hesitate to reach out. And we hope you join us next week as we talk about some more topics to eventually help you mine your light and get yourself to a good spot.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
See you next week here.